I'm originally from Pittsburgh. Started with animation when I was in high school, doing films trying to emulate Ray Harryhausen's work, building stop motion puppets and combining those with rear screen animation, and in a very primitive setup, obviously, but that actually got me my job at the Animators. I would say probably around 8, my dad had shown me Mighty Joe Young and King Kong on TV, and it was pretty amazing. You know, you didn't know quite what was going on. You knew it wasn't real, but yet it had shadows and density and real weight in the characters. So that inspired me, and then Disney animation inspired me. And from that point, I started doing some films in high school, crude setup in my basement. 1 year out of high school, I took that film to the Animators through a unique set of providential circumstances where Bob's bank account was where my aunt worked, and took his check in one day and it said the Animators on, and she said, "Wow, do you do animation?" And he said, "Yeah." And she said, "Boy, I have a nephew that does these films and he'd love to come down and talk to you." And I did, and 3 months after that Bob hired me. Prior to Night of the Living Dead, most of the work we did was animated commercials. We did a lot of slideshows, which was a big medium back in the 60s for, this was of course big corporate headquarters here in Pittsburgh for all the corporations, so we would do them for Alcoa and US Steel and so on, and with a creative bent to most of them when we could influence it, but there was a lot of animation stand work, whether it was slideshows or films or whatever, but Night of the Living Dead was the first feature film that Bob got into the studio. Well, when I was with the Animators, and after 1970, I basically was in charge of the animation department. Things would come in. Bob was director, producer, and also was an animator. He was an amazing guy. But at some point, whenever I started my own company, that just happened to be when the crossover was, when Creepshow and Creepshow 2 came along and so on. So those were literally run through my studio, and Bob really didn't have any connection, except that I did farm out some of the animation stand photography to him as well. And he did he did the title work on Creepshow. I also did some sculpting on that for Tom Savini. Then Creepshow 2 came along, and that was pretty extensive. That was about 11 or 12 minutes of cell animation, which was a huge production, which took us, I think, about 9 months. And it was pretty involved because we were also still taking on commercials during that time, and then there was a slight overlap with our work on Evil Dead 2, which was not extensive compared to everything they did, but it was extensive for us. So I built stop-motion armature for the crawling hand, animated the stop-motion crawling hand, created some armatures for some of the other puppets, and did a little bit of other stop-motion for some of those scenes. After that, it's mostly been commercials and here and there doing storyboards for productions that have come into town, Cemeteries Club, Lorenzo's Oil. And then when CG came along, which now has been here for quite a while, I started playing with that because my attitude was always I wanted to be an animator and animate. So I did stop motion puppets and I did the traditional animation. And after that, when CG came along, it's like, well, that seems like a fun playground. Why not jump into that too? So I've done a little bit of CG work here and there on worked on an episode of Xena and an episode of Starship Troopers Chronicles, and last year worked on a kids production called Andy's Airplanes, doing some CG and storyboard and different things for them. And we do the cell animation for the Pittsburgh Pirates on the scoreboard there. Well, that's so long ago, I'm not sure what we might have done first, but we had done probably title work for them and shot different photos on the animation stand for them. And at some point when they were working on the film, you know, Bob was in the film, and so was Bill Mogish, who was at our studio, and some of the different people there actually went up and became zombies. Or, yeah, the animators were always, and as liaison runner, if you will, I got to go over and pick up soundtracks that they recorded for us. Carl and Marilyn were the two of the main people in town doing most of the commercial voice work, character voices as well as straight and dramatic voices. So we were always over there, whether we were recording or I was just running back and forth picking up soundtracks for commercials. First of all, I think it just happened to come around at the right time. There wasn't much of that done, and it wasn't done with the, well, let's call it a serious and a very impactful approach to zombies and flesh eating and so on. So I think it was rather stark and rather revolutionary, and I think people reacted to it because there wasn't any of that at that time. And of course, as we know with anything, and particularly Hollywood, once something makes money, well, then you're going to see everyone else jumping on and going, hey, that's a great idea, why don't we do that? Night of the Living Dead does stand out as an original, and it has birthed an entire industry, if you will. Whether that's good or bad, I'm not sure for how far some of that's gone, but I think that it's definitely had a huge impact. Well, I think we were all shocked, you know. You have this guy who's kept everything together and fought off this world of zombies and protected the people that are with him and so on, and been the, you know, voice of reason throughout this trauma. And, you know, just when victory is at hand, of course, he dies. It's just very impactful. It's one of those things that I don't know who really wrote that into the original script. I don't know if it was George or Jack or who. But again, it was another, I think it was another one of those, let's shock you, let's not let you assume that you know what this is all about, especially not the ending. And yeah, filming, I mean, I had seen it before we actually filmed the end sequence in rough cut, so okay, that part wasn't so much a surprise, but again, it always had a big impact, even shooting the stills and stuff. I think, you know, just reliving the fact that, you know, here this guy had battled all the forces of evil. And